exposing all those shortcuts, I think.
Yeah, well, and again, that's the, if your intent is a true partnership with your business partners.
Well, that's fair, yeah.
And I don't have my chart about the way the world has changed in this data set.
Yeah.
But the way the world has changed is that, most of the time we have these, hierarchical org charts, and we realize that that's not how we work, right? We do not work through a hierarchy anymore. We work as a network. So people have different roles throughout the day, different teams that they work on, and the org chart usually does not extend to government, customers, business partners, etc. But when we work with those people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we have to realize and work them into our collaborative architecture so that we have ways of communicating with them. There are various approaches to that, right? So the pharmaceutical company I was working with is trying to figure out, how do I extend my collaboration environment? I'm going to be the 800-pound gorilla. I'm going to specify that if you want to work with me, you're going to work with me my way, right? And a lot of large corporations have that feeling, right? When you're a medium-sized corporation and you're working with two large corporations, you have a big problem, because you've got to then reconcile the architectures of, this one wants me to do this, and another one's implementing a different technology, and so I've got to deal with those. And I warn the big companies about that all the time. But these are kind of the realities of business that we have to deal with. So there is the smart tag. So it actually identifies. This is, in this case, Rob Enderle, who some of you may know. He's one of the most quoted people in Silicon Valley, I'm told. I actually get calls. He's a fellow Giga analyst. I get calls from magazines and newspapers up here going, "Can you please give me a quote? I'm tired of talking to Rob." And so this shows, I can now set up meetings and mails and open his contact record and all this kind of stuff, because it's parsed out through feature extraction that this is a person. Now, it's not perfect at that, right? Because it picks up, I also write poetry, and I occasionally write literary criticism, and of course picks up when I'm writing about James Joyce and says, would you like to have a meeting with James Joyce, which we know is temporarily impossible.
But you would like to.
I would love to, but I don't have his phone number in Dublin, and I probably can figure out where he's located at the moment, though.
Hasn't changed.
Yeah, it doesn't change very often. We're trying. I've got to get somebody to channel, and I don't think we've worked channelers into the collaborative platform yet. Another product that I watch is Enfish, and what Enfish does, and some of you may have this, because this is all the stuff that you wonder why Microsoft didn't just put it in Outlook, right? This is, I'm looking at a contact, and look, here's all the email related to that contact, and that contact works for this company, and therefore I get information about that company over here. And for money, of course, this is the $99 personal version. For money, they will customize all this stuff so that you have different data sources, and it will also combine various queries. So right now, it's either company or person that it will go through and relate over here. You can get those combined if you pay money to them. But they sell a portal as well. But they also then give you all the information that is related to your contact, the documents that reference them, the emails that are about them, and they give you, it's not shown on here, but they also give you relevancy so that you can see how relevant they are. And you can write sophisticated queries and shift between these various points in the environment. And again, that's very adaptive. What I think is interesting in their technology is also they're starting to apply this to the server. If I've got a piece of information, I go back to that challenge that I made about computers not performing information management tasks, right? I just did a piece on personal knowledge management tools, and I interviewed some of our clients and talked to them about what what's bugging you about how computers work. And one of the things that came out on the personal knowledge management thing is I have to manage the organization of my files. And I've actually challenged, and I'll give you the challenge now, right? So you are now sitting at home with your file cabinet. You have multiple hanging folders and manila folders with various organization structure on them, and you have your home personal computer. What is the corollary? And I know there may be a few anal retentive people in here, but most of you probably are not. What is the corollary between the files on the computer and the files in the filing cabinet? you have completely different organization methods, although it's the same metaphor, right? It's a file cabinet. There are folders on the computer, either on the Mac or the PC, and you've organized your life differently electronically than you have in hard copy. And you probably have organized your home computer, your work files, and your home files all differently, right? And so you now have to remember the metadata, the organization structure, and the physical location of all the stuff you want to find, right? So, yes?
Well, partly that has to do with the physical context that the information is stored in. I'm not going to store the information in my filing cabinet, same way I store in the computer, because the computer medium is much more flexible than the physical.
Right, but there may be certain things, granted, I mean, if you have a list of photos, for instance, on the computer, you may not have a file for those photos. You may not have a photo file at home. But if you think about even taxes, you know, I've talked to some people about very specific things. You know, tax records, where I may have electronic tax records and I may have paper tax records, and they name the file folders differently, and they stick them under different hierarchies, et cetera. And yes, you can do a lot more with a computer in terms of moving stuff around. What you can't do with either one of them very well is cross-reference stuff, right? So I have to go out and create, if I want to cross-reference a piece of information, I have to create an alias or a shortcut and stick it into another folder so that when I open that folder I can see and click on that and it'll open the original document. And we don't do that very often. Now, wouldn't it be nice, and this is one of the things that EnFish is doing, wouldn't it be nice if I automatically had cross-references made for me? So if I put something in a document, in a folder, it references that, has analyzed the content of the other folders on my system and or on the server. And think about if this extends to work groups, right? So I've got these community sites, it's analyzed the content in communities, created a context for the communities, and now I create a piece of content. It automatically then posts cross-references to various places around the network to here's a piece of information that you should know about. There are issues with privacy that have not yet been solved, but they are dealing with that on an enterprise level, and most enterprises say, you know, the stuff that's on our computers and our networks is ours. Yes?
There's a different issue, which is the model for the information structure. Cross-referencing is good if what you want is a link, a way of jumping sort of from one place to another.
Yep.
But if you don't have a more powerful file system model, then the problem with putting these things in all these multiple folders is the standard file system model isn't good at helping you organize, except in a hierarchical way.
Right, right. And that's where the file systems, at least as I know it now, the file systems that we know and love are being rewritten to some degree as well.
But it isn't just that you need more information or linking of information. You need a structure in which to put it, and those things aren't around.
Right.
It's called an object. They are around. What it is knowledge base is important, because otherwise you have an explosion of terms that occurs. And by cross-referencing everything, what you end up is garbage in, garbage out, just much more garbage.
Yeah.
This is an old database problem. It's constantly being revisited.
Yep. No, but it's also, as I said, it's, you know, there's the information management side. There is some containment that can be had about this. But you know, one of you know, this is coming from the issues that we're seeing from end users of in giving feedback to the, you know, what's a priority at the R&D labs at various companies, right? So if I were to start with my chart about the information, and I did mention that, you know, 80% of the stuff that we have in our brains is never going to be digitized. Of the stuff that we've done, we spend a lot of our time dealing with transactional information because it's tractable, because we understand it, and that's where a lot of the R&D dollars go. So we look at something like 80% of our R&D and 80% of our IT budgets are spent on about 4% of our information, which is structured transaction stuff, because we understand that. And one of the things I'm trying to do with this conversation is get Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, and others to start having the conversations, which I realize I've done object-oriented databases and all kinds of other things in my past too, and AI and all kinds of things. And these are questions that keep coming up. But we don't have as many conversations. And even when I see the information visions from many of these vendors, it's not about the management of information, it's about the delivery of information. Right? How do I ping you wherever you are and connect you to the world? great, I'm pinging too much now. I want to turn off my cell phone, right? What I want to do is start having computers that are helping me manage the information, right? So at the very personal level, if I'm dealing with this issue and dealing with cross-reference, I'm dealing with a finite set of information within my space, and I can probably get some value out of that. But I will see as this evolves where it takes us. Another thing that's adaptive, and this is probably a bit of a stretch, but this is instant messaging, where it's interpreting, it's got a database or something else behind it. It's actually using natural language processing to figure out what you're asking about and structuring that behind the scenes into a query and giving you information back about, in this case, an order and people who can help you do something. But we look at this information, this intelligent content services as being a very broad middleware layer where a lot of these technologies start residing. And we stop looking at them as point solutions to, gee, I have a natural language problem. Lots of the problems that we see could benefit from natural language capabilities. And shouldn't we have a natural language service that's available? Shouldn't we have an intelligent content service that provides pattern recognition, one that does rule bases? And I think as we move forward, we will see that evolve. And this is what we were debating just a moment ago. This is we want to see a change in the relationship between people and computers. Right? Systems right now, as I stated earlier, are very much about doing I/O, executing applications, and managing that kind of environment. They're the exact same kinds of things that we did on 512K computers that we do now, right? They do those basic functions. They just take a lot more memory, a lot more horsepower to do the same thing. They are not adaptive. They do not understand their own environment that well, although we're starting to see, and this is where the autonomic computing kinds of work is looking at it from the server side, understanding the context. We need to do the same thing with information. Self-organizing, where it's collaborative, so it may actually involve us. If it doesn't know, it may involve us. And it's anticipatory, so that as we're doing our work, it's presenting us with information. Now, I do not mean this in the sense that our friend Clippy from Microsoft Office pops up in an annoying way and says, gee, I'm here to help you, I've got the right information, right? But as we look at what IBM is doing with their new workplace initiative, where we have a portal, and I think they're using, and I hate this, they're using very general terms. I've got a focus of attention, right? So I've got a document, a Word document, an email document, some kind of transaction sitting in the middle of my portal, and all the other portals are related to that. So that when I'm reading that piece of content, the names of my instant messaging, the news that I'm getting, the other information in my environment is shifting to meet what I've decided is important to me at the moment. And you can also tune, you'll eventually be able to tune those parameters so that you can decide what kinds of notifications, for instance, you want. So you may have a notification panel and you say, if I'm managing my email box and it can tell by how many clicks you're doing and if you're deleting and moving stuff around, it'll turn down the notifications so you don't get disturbed while you're doing that. Or if you're reading something, you can set up those parameters. But then there's a lot of things that come out of thinking about technology in this way. And I think that's really the challenge that we're making to the industry, that you need to think about technology in a different way than we have been. Yes?
I'm struggling to bring a point into, and I know it's something you've got within the context of what you're thinking about. I'm not sure I've heard it or digested it. We've talked about context relative to the tool set and technologies we use, but I'm trying to think of context from the standpoint of the process. Yep. Or the value of the activity that I'm going in. And let me just pick a concrete example, and then if you could sort of rip it apart and share your thinking with us on it. I'm a physician, for example, and rather than have the middleware be involved with every keystroke interaction, let's say that what I wanted is when I'm diagnosing you as a patient, I wanted to get involved and understand that the activity I'm engaged in right now is patient diagnosis, right. So that the intelligent content interaction understands that process context, and it's doing its filtering basis on how do you do diagnosis and certain AI and knowledge rules right. related to that, whereas this gentleman